So my name is Kelly Bresnowitz, and I am a fine art major with an architecture minor here at Elizabethtown College. And this is my second architectural design studio class. I'm a senior this year. This year I'm doing an urban townhouse design with hopefully some environmental and LEED standards in place. So here's some of my design inspiration. Last year I worked on a suburban modern style home, and I really enjoyed that project, so I knew I wanted to do something similar. And I'll be going to school, grad school, for interior design next year, so I've always been really interested in residential homes and all of that sort of thing. And I was also really intrigued by designing a more urban home. There's a lot of environmental benefits for doing so, and I was also intrigued by the smaller design constraints. And again, like I said, I wanted to stick with the same modern aesthetic. I really like that. I love the clean lines and the geometric shapes. So here's a few pictures of some of my design inspiration taken from various design firms from around the country. A little bit of background about modern architecture. It began in the early 20th century, gained popularity after World War II, and like I said, uses a lot of 90-degree angles, simplicity of form, clean lines, and also industrial materials. And also environmental benefits. Building in an already developed urban area prevents urban sprawl, which therefore prevents the destruction of more wildlife, the prevention of using more natural resources, prevention of emissions, a lot of environmental benefits. So I thought that was very important for this design. And more on that, that you can get LEED points for it too. LEED is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and it's developed by the U.S. Green Building Council, who I interned for last year. And it's a rating and certification system used to assess green building. And location and transportation are an entire category of LEED points, and I think not a lot of people realize that. And this category can grant up to 16 points for your project, and certification only requires a minimum of 40. So you can get over a quarter of your points purely from the location of your project. If you put it in a place that has surrounding density, sensitive land protection, access to quality transit, even putting in bike racks or having a way to hook up an electric car, all of that can grant you LEED points. And it's a fantastic way to get certification for your project. So here's my initial sketch. It's a little light, I didn't realize that, sorry about that. But I knew I wanted to do kind of a boxy townhome design. I wanted to include a garage so families could have an electric car if they desired, or they could use it to store their bikes or yard equipment for their little backyard, whatever they need. And I knew I wanted to have a few bedrooms, so it could be shared by maybe a couple young couples, some students, whoever wanted to use the home, or maybe a family with a couple young kids. So I tried to have a first floor with a garage, a second floor entrance, and 2 floors with bedrooms. And I was kind of inspired also by like New York brownstones with the flight of stairs going up to the second floor parlor type of room. And here's an elevation in AutoCAD. Because it's modern, there's a lot of straight lines, very clean, very similar to my initial sketch. And I also did side elevations. These are much more important for the end units. Because of the constraints of city lots, I wasn't sure quite how many units we'd have in a row. I did 4, so then that way I could show an example of a couple middle units as well as an end on either side. And I was also asked to do some research into where I'd like to place my building. And I'll be studying in DC next year, so I was like, oh, okay, I'll put it in DC, it's my favorite city. But then I did more and more research, and I realized that their grid system isn't as regular as a lot of other cities around the country. So it's not quite a standard spot, so it would really depend on where exactly the land was. So I decided to do something that was only 40 feet in length, so it could really be placed anywhere. It could have a slight extension if necessary, it could have a larger backyard if the builder desired, and it could be, you know, maybe 3 units in a row, 4 units like I built, maybe even more. You could have 5, 6, 7, 10. I wanted it to be very adaptable. But then there's the side elevations, so you can see what it would look like on either side. And finally, a floor plan. Like I said, I wanted to have a garage with room for bikes and room for an electric car, a den or a bonus room, something that could be used as a home office, a children's playroom, something very adaptable. Also could be used as kind of indoor-outdoor space if there's a backyard on the lot. Going upstairs, it's a very open floor plan, which is commonly seen in modern architecture. It opens up into a kitchen, a living room, and a dining room. There's another bathroom there. Then there's 4 bedrooms on the upper 2 floors. 2 are on the smaller side, which can be used for children or offices, something of the sort. And 2 are larger, 1 with an ensuite, so that's the master, but if you had 2 couples sharing a home, I'm sure one would be okay with getting the balcony instead. And finally, I'm sure you've all seen it already, my foam board model. It's constructed in a 1/4-inch scale. Last year when I constructed my model, I used a slightly larger scale and ended up with a very, very large model. So I decided to condense it down a little bit this year. I've experience in theater building models of sets. So that's where I first learned how to do this. And of course, sets are a lot smaller than homes. So it's definitely been an interesting challenge making 2 houses rather than set designs in foam board. I've also discovered that they sell specific plastic tools used to make these sort of buildings rather than just using X-Acto knives. Because X-Acto knives, you end up with rough edges, whereas these Foamworks tools come with, you can get sets with several different types. You can get a beveled edge, you can get a rabbit edge, I guess it's called. They kind of fit nicely into each other, and you can use super glue, and you end up with a much cleaner design and a much more realistic interpretation of your architecture. And finally, the doors and windows on the front are drawn in Adobe Illustrator, and they're drawn to scale, and printed and cut out and glued onto the design. And the stairs, the plastic is actually packing material with Sharpie drawn on rather than trying to construct a metal railing. And that's about all I have. If anyone has any questions, I'd love to answer them.
So is the depth there about 40 feet? Is that
Yeah,
what
yeah, it's about 40, 45 to
Yeah,
scale,
and
include the stairs.
front, the width there would be?
It's 18 feet per house.
Okay.
Yeah.
To make it handicap accessible, have you thought about maybe one alternative being an elevator system then?
That would be a fantastic idea, and I think there would definitely be enough space for that in the design. I wanted to make sure that it was kind of a roomy design. I can go back and go back to my floor plan. I certainly think there'd be room for an elevator somewhere around there. The garage door's 9 feet wide. You could certainly pull a wheelchair in there and go into an elevator, so.
And we're for the elderly too.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. I have 2 cousins who are disabled, so that would be a good idea to have that in the home.
Kelly, maybe, I can't tell exactly, but can you explain what happens on the back of the building?
The back of the buildings. That was something I wasn't quite sure about because I wasn't sure how large the lot would be. Ideally, I'd love to include maybe a back porch, maybe even a small pool or hot tub, but it really depends on the size of the lot. So I left it kind of vague, thinking that if the project would progress further and get, funding and all of that and get an actual lot, then it could be determined what to actually do with the back of the building.
Yeah, I actually meant windows. I think.
Oh,
I meant the
windows, yeah.
actual- Yeah, because you did show the side views, but
Right.
the problem with row houses, of course,
They're
is
very
if you
dark.
don't have the corner lot, what happens to the
Right.
2 houses in the center?
Yeah.
They're not gonna have any light.
Mhm.
Have you given any consideration of how light might get in those, or I was wondering what happens in the back of them as far as windows?
I was also conscious of placing the bathrooms all along the side, so they wouldn't be as much of a concern with windows. You don't really need windows in a bathroom. But I tried to place the kitchen and bedrooms and all of that sort of thing in the front and the back so they could have windows in all of them. I've actually seen a lot of more modern townhouses that actually have a whole wall of windows in the back, but my concern with that was privacy. So I think that would also have to do with whatever lot it is. If there's a building super close, then maybe you'd want smaller windows, and if there's a little bit more room and a little bit of a backyard, then maybe do the whole wall of windows. But thank you so much for that, I appreciate that. Yes?
Any use of solar panels, or have you considered a garden rooftop, the flat roof?
I did consider that, yeah. Last year, I actually did a green roof, which is another way to kind of use rainwater and all of that sort of thing. I didn't really get too much into the science side of this. All of my dimensions work out. All the railings are to code, doors are the proper size, that sort of thing. But if this project were to progress further, I would definitely need to work with engineers and determine, what the energy usage would be and how many solar panels we would need, or if we could fit a rooftop deck or a green roof on there. I think that would be a good idea.
Did you have any thoughts about construction materials as you were developing
Well, it's.
What it might look like?
Yeah, what it might look like. I was hoping for a lot of grays and blacks. That's just my kind of aesthetic though. I can go back to my inspiration images. Modern architecture uses a lot of industrial materials, concrete, metal, that sort of thing. So probably something similar to that, a lot of grays, tans, that sort of thing. Probably not like a brick, brownstone sort of, but more gray. Anything else? Yes,
Modular prefab, you thinking in that?
that could work, definitely. Again, I'm more the design side and less the science side, so I'd definitely have to work with some engineers on that, but I think that would be a good idea too. It could probably help with construction cost.
Yeah, it would, because you have much of it is standardized to be modularized, and easily assembled on the lot.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
probably work. Anybody else? Thank you so much.